Chapter 506. Conrad, you can leave the hospital now. In the ward of Boston's Massachusetts General Hospital, a nurse spoke in a sharp voice to the big man who was packing up. This hospital was famous. There were only 3 famous hospitals in Boston. Of course, some small clinics or private hospitals were not included in this list. The 3 most famous ones were Massachusetts General Hospital, Dana-Farber Cancer Center, and Boston Children's Hospital. Among them, Massachusetts General Hospital was the second most comprehensive hospital in the United States. Dana-Farber Cancer Center was the 4th most specialized cancer hospital in the United States. Boston Children's Hospital was the top pediatric hospital in the United States. Of course, this ranking was there for all to see. The prices of the healers were also quite famous. Oh, thank you. Hearing the nurse's words, the big man who was packing up said in a low voice, "Papaya." Looking at the guy's appearance, the nurse couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Then she swayed her big butt and left. The hospital was just like the entertainment industry. Sometimes, it was really hard to see the light, especially when it came to private life. Of course, this was not absolute. There were good people everywhere, but bad people still accounted for the majority. It was the same in the hospital. In the domestic medical system, private life was very messy. It was even more so in foreign hospitals. The United States was a very open country. Thinking about the contents of so many FBI warnings, which were all related to hospitals, it could be roughly understood. Although Massachusetts General Hospital was the second best hospital in the United States, the nurses here were obviously unwilling to be left out. Conrad was more than 2 meters tall and had a body full of muscles. He was treated with the best medicine and lived in the best room. Naturally, he was targeted by many female nurses. However, this guy seemed to be born without love for women. He didn't seem to understand the explicit hints of these women and kept playing dumb. At first, these female nurses were very patient, but later their attitudes slowly changed. They either ignored him or acted like they did just now. However, these attitudes couldn't change his character. His character was like this. Conrad took his things and left the hospital. As soon as he walked to the door, he saw a police car parked there. "Get in the car." Looking at the police car in front of him, Conrad was a little hesitant. In the end, he went around it and prepared to leave, but the person sitting in the car didn't let him go. Instead, he took the initiative to open the door of the passenger seat and said to him. Hearing this person's words, Conrad couldn't help but glance at this guy. He hesitated for a while before getting into the car. "Where are you going?" "I'll give you a ride." Watching Conrad get in the car, the driver said with a smile. If Jiang Hai were here, he would definitely recognize this person. He had met this person before. This person was called Doyle George. When the Gray Gang in Boston attacked him, this guy had fought side by side with him. However, it was just as Jiang Hai thought. This guy was a gold-plated person, relying on the heroic battle he had fought in the past. He was then transferred back to Boston and became a sheriff. The United States was different from Wuxia. There was no division chief or section chief in the police department. The police ranks here were only divided into police officer, sergeant, superintendent, sheriff, superintendent, and other positions. Of course, each state had different laws and naturally the names were different, but the meaning was similar. The position of a sheriff was basically the same as the power of the director of some domestic police stations. If it was in a big city like Boston, it would be similar to the power of the director of a local police station. This also proved how strong Doyle George was. Of course, it referred to the strength of his family. As for him and Conrad, it was mainly because of the battle with Jiang Hai. In that battle, Conrad was shot many times. After a simple treatment by Bernice, he was sent to the hospital. Doyle George also went to the hospital and happened to know this guy. After knowing that he had betrayed Jiang Hai at the last moment, and that was why Conrad's men didn't become hostages, Doyle became interested in him. Gradually he came to see Conrad. After the two met a few times, not only did they become friends, but they were also very close to each other. Of course, the money for Conrad's treatment was paid for by Jiang Hai. He didn't care about the tens of thousands of dollars, but Doyle George helped him get discharged from the hospital. He also knew about this guy's history. He used to be an underground boxer, which made him want to recruit him into his police force. This was also one of the reasons why he was here. "Thank you." Hearing Doyle George's words, Conrad didn't say the specific location, but just said in a muffled voice, "You don't have to thank me. You don't have to thank me. It was Jiang Hai who paid you, but you still have to be careful in the future. You can't just trust anyone." Hearing his words, Doyle, who had been with him for a long time, naturally knew what he meant. He smiled and said, "Jiang Hai? Benefactor, please take me to Jiang Hai." Hearing his words, Conrad was stunned for a moment, then his gaze became more determined. He originally came to Boston to look for Jiang Hai, but due to a freak combination of factors, he became Jiang Hai's enemy and entered the Grey Gang, almost killing Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai actually paid for his treatment. In his opinion, he owed Jiang Hai 2 lives. Upon hearing his words, Doyle couldn't help but chuckle helplessly. However, he knew that this was Constant's habit, so he didn't say much. But in the United States, being a government official was useless because the Americans didn't care about government officials at all. If you wanted to survive in the United States, the most important thing was money. In this capitalist society, only money was recognized, not people. Most importantly, just having money wasn't enough because there were people who were richer than you. You had to have something that could save your life, such as oil futures. This was also one of the reasons why Jiang Hai was so careful. He was afraid of death. It was that simple. Forget it, I can't control you. You don't have to explain to me. I'm not related to you. You can do as you see fit. She didn't know why, but when Bernice heard that Jiang Hai was going to leave, she couldn't help but feel annoyed. But on second thought, what was there to be annoyed about? She was not related to him, so what was there to be annoyed about? So after hesitating for a moment, she said directly, then lowered her head to eat the steak in front of her. Seeing that she did not speak, Jiang Hai also glanced at her carefully. He muttered in his heart, "Is this girl on her period? Why is she so impulsive? When she heard that I was leaving, it was as if she wanted to eat me. Is there a mistake?" Just as Jiang Hai was muttering there, the doorbell outside rang. Chapter 507. Hearing the doorbell, Jiang Hai was stunned. He walked to the door and picked it up. There were 2 people standing outside the door. Jiang Hai was familiar with them. One was Doyle George. After all, he had fought side by side with Jiang Hai. After that incident, Doyle was transferred to the Boston Police Department and became a sheriff. He was directly promoted with seniority. It seemed that his family was at least very powerful in the police field. Jiang Hai also had some impression of the other person. He was a big guy. Jiang Hai had seen him 3 times. The first time was in an underground boxing match in Miami. At that time he beat someone to death and was seriously injured. The second time was on the streets of Miami. He found him interesting, so he invited him to eat a hamburger. At the same time there was a car accident. Of course, 70% of the treatment fee for this big guy was paid by Zhang Heng. The 4 girls who hit him didn't have much money. Their families could only pay for the basic treatment. The follow-up health care and other expenses, such as the treatment of his original internal injuries, were all paid by Jiang Hai. The third time they met was in his villa. This guy was Jiang Hai's enemy, but for some reason he betrayed him at the last moment. He saved Delina and the others, giving them time to release Azalina and deal with the invaders. Then he was sent to the hospital. Although Jiang Hai couldn't wait to kill all those who invaded his home, this guy helped him a lot. But after all, this guy had helped him, so Jiang Hai didn't find trouble with him. Instead, he cured him. But now, seeing them come, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What are they doing here? Are they thanking me? This was the most likely reason, but Jiang Hai really didn't know the specifics. "Hey Doyle, how come you have time to come here?" Looking at the 2 people on the other side of the phone, since he couldn't figure it out, he might as well ask directly. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who liked to keep things to himself. "Hey man, you're right. I'm very busy. This time I'm mainly here to accompany this big guy. Open the door first, let's go in and talk." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George said with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai didn't doubt him. He opened the door directly and waited for the 2 in front of the villa. After the door was opened, the 2 returned to the car and then drove into Jiang Hai's manor. After parking the car in the parking lot, the 2 also walked out. Looking at Jiang Hai standing at the door, Conrad couldn't help trembling. He had spent a lot of effort to find Jiang Hai, but fortunately he finally found him. Come in. Benefactor." Chapter 514. How is Atlantic City? Is it beautiful? Prawalton, who was lying in the passenger seat of Jiang Hai's battle shield and wearing sunglasses, asked Jiang Hai who was driving. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod gently. "It's very beautiful, but there are too few people." Jiang Hai is telling the truth. The buildings in Atlantic City are beautiful, the roads are wide, and there is a bay next to it. It looks like a treasure land. It is also the 2nd largest gambling city in the United States and one of the top 4 gambling cities in the world. However, in Jiang Hai's opinion, This place is indeed a bit, well, too peaceful. There are very few people. Have you seen Atlantic Empire? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Peraltan turned to Jiang Hai and asked, but after hearing what she said, Jiang Hai nodded. Atlantic Empire is a very famous American TV series. Although he didn't finish watching it, he roughly watched it. Basically, it's about the founding of Atlantic City and the chaos of the Grey Gang here. After watching it for a long time, it became boring, so Jiang Hai didn't finish watching it. When Atlantic City was founded, it was just like Las Vegas. It was a normal city and had nothing to do with the gambling city. But in 1931, Las Vegas became a gambling city in order to revive the economy. After seeing the benefits of Las Vegas, Atlantic City also became a gambling city in the 1970s. But unlike Las Vegas, it's in the southwest and this place is under New York. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Peraltan also said to Jiang Hai, it's nothing more than that after the founding of Las Vegas, the government is in charge, and after the founding of the Atlantic Empire, the real boss is the Grey Gang. What rules can the Grey Gang have? They rob people and customers everywhere. If they win money, they don't let others go. If they lose money, they let others go. This is the Grey Gang. It's precisely because of this that Atlantic City was very popular in the beginning, but in the 1980s, when airplanes became a common means of transportation, most rich people would rather go to Las Vegas than come here to play. When the tax revenue was reduced, the government reacted and began to vigorously attack the Grey Gang. Now there are only a few rats in the entire Atlantic City. The Grey Gang was exterminated, even the foreign gangs such as South U Gang, Mo Gang, Latin American Gang, they were all wiped out. But the foundation built over the years is not easy for others to have confidence in. It's just like when the United States was reforming and opening up, there was a large-scale pollution of land and water, but that was many years ago. The land and rivers in the United States were already very clean, and some places even reached the standard of drinking water. But back then the United States government said not to catch fish in the river to eat it. Everyone in the United States still abides by that.